This story happened 2 years ago on my late grandfather's farm. Before I start, let me describe the farm. We had a big wooden house with 2 sheds behind it, a large grassy field about half the size of a football field leading into the woods. And on the left side of the house, there were deep woods stretching out quite a bit. In front of the house were various crops: corn, carrots, apple trees, my grandfather's tomato garden, and a few animals like rabbits, chickens, and 2 livestock guardian dogs. On the right side of the house was a small building where we stored the tractor and other vehicles. When I first visited the farm, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched, but that feeling faded over time. I tried to help out as much as I could, and one morning I noticed one of the dogs was bloody and had a broken paw. I told my grandfather, and he immediately took the dog to the vet. While he was gone, I went to check on the rabbits and found their area in complete chaos. It looked like a war zone, rabbit parts everywhere. I called my grandfather and told him what I saw. He was furious. We'd lost 3 rabbits to some unknown animal. We tried to figure out what it could have been. Was it a bear? A wolf? We didn't know. My grandfather decided to borrow trail cameras from a couple of his friends. He set up 2 cameras around the animal pens, one in the garden, one facing the apple trees and cornfield, and 2 behind the house near the sheds. 4 days later, the dog came back from the vet with a cast and had to stay inside for a while. Around that time, my friends, Carl, Jake, Mike, and Jacob, called and asked if they could come over for a camping trip near my grandfather's farm. I asked my grandfather, and he said it was fine. The next day, we got ready to camp, but before we left, my grandfather pulled me aside, handed me his double-barrel shotgun, and said, "Be careful. Watch out for bears." He also gave me about 9 or 10 shells. We headed into the woods, not too far from the farm. We could still see the house and sheds in the distance. We found a spot, and Mike started setting up a large tent. We built a fire pit, and Jacob and I started the fire while Jake pulled out food and drinks, colas, water, meats, and sweets. We had a great time talking and eating. Occasionally we heard noises around us, but brushed them off. At one point, Mike thought he saw a bear. I quickly grabbed the shotgun off my back, loaded it, and scanned the area. It turned out to just be a deer, and we all laughed about it. As night fell, 2 of my friends went to sleep while Jake, Carl, and I stayed up, chatting about school and our summer. Suddenly we heard the loudest twig snapping from deeper in the woods. The sound echoed, and then everything went silent. Jacob and Mike woke up and came out of the tent, asking what happened. I said it was probably an animal stepping on a twig, but then we heard more snapping sounds, closer this time. Jacob grabbed a high-powered flashlight and started scanning the woods. Soon, we heard snapping from multiple directions. I strapped on a headlamp, raised the shotgun, and fired a warning shot into the air. Whatever was out there scattered. We calmed down and tried to relax, even playing some music on a handheld radio. But 2 hours later, the snapping noises returned, this time from all around us. The sounds grew louder, and then Jacob screamed, "What the hell is that?" I turned to where his flashlight was pointing and caught a glimpse of something running. I fired the shotgun in that direction, and whatever I hit let out a scream. A deep, guttural, almost demonic sound, like a fox with distorted vocal cords. That's when we bolted, leaving everything behind. As we reached the grassy field, we could still hear whatever was moving in the woods. I reloaded the shotgun, turned, and fired another shot, screaming, "Leave! This is private property. I'm calling the cops." In the distance, I saw my grandfather near one of the sheds, holding a rifle in one hand and a phone in the other, already on the line with 911. I backed up to the shed, scared out of my mind. My grandfather reassured me, saying, "It's going to be fine. The cops are on their way." My parents came to pick me up the next day. A few days later, my grandfather checked the trail cameras. One showed something moving into the cornfield, while another captured something peeking out from behind a shed. My grandfather believed it was a pack of wolves or coyotes terrorizing the farm. He called some of his hunting buddies to keep watch over the property, and after that, things settled down. Nothing else happened after that incident, but it's a night I'll never forget. I just want to preface this by saying that I've never used Reddit for advice or help before, so I have no idea what I'm doing. But this incident really shook me, and I'd love to hear your opinions on what it might be. I work as a cleaner at a high school in my town. The school was built sometime around the 1960s, and while it's had a few upgrades, most of the buildings are still original and unchanged. My cleaning area is a long, corridor-like building. One end leads to the hall auditorium, followed by the drama room, and then 3 classrooms in a row. The building is one of the older ones, and at night it can get pretty creepy. It's just this long corridor with dark, shadowy hallways branching off, but usually I just focus on my work and don't think too much about it. Yesterday, around 7 p.m., I was in a rush to finish cleaning and needed to vacuum the 3 classrooms at the far end of the corridor. I grabbed my vacuum from the storeroom in the building next door and started walking to the furthest classroom so I could work my way back, locking up as I went. I wasn't feeling spooked or thinking about anything scary. I just wanted to get my job done. As I reached the doorway to the second classroom, I heard an incredibly loud bang coming from inside the room. It sounded like someone slamming both hands against a window. I froze in my tracks, listening for any other sounds. Nothing else happened, so I brushed it off and cautiously stepped inside. I noticed that one of the old windows had come unlatched and swung open. That seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I shrugged it off and moved on. But as I reached the third classroom and started setting up my vacuum, I heard another loud bang, this time from the entrance of the corridor behind me. Now I was on edge. It couldn't have been another window unlatching. I walked back to the entrance to check it out, but as I did, another loud bang came from the opposite end of the hallway near the third classroom. This cycle repeated itself with me walking from one end of the hallway to the other, trying to figure out the source of the noise, only to hear it again at the opposite end. The hallway is about 70 to 80 meters long, so walking back and forth was exhausting and nerve-wracking. I've always believed in ghosts 100%, and I've experienced weird noises and happenings in this building before, but nothing like this. I decided to speak up and said, "Hello?" I also thought it might be kids outside, knocking on the windows as a prank. As I stood in the middle classroom, the banging suddenly came from the window right next to me. It was deafening, so loud that I genuinely yelped in fear. I've never been so scared in my life. For the first time, I actually ran out of the building. Whatever it was, it felt like it was toying with me. The noises seemed to escalate the more frightened I became. I was on the verge of tears by the time I left, and I kept checking the windows during the whole ordeal. I didn't see anyone outside. I have to work there again tonight, and honestly, I'm dreading it. During the lockdown, I experienced some of the most terrifying nightmares and sleep paralysis episodes of my life. It got so bad that I'd cry every morning as soon as I woke up because of how real and horrifying the dreams felt. To make sense of it all, I started researching dreams, looking for explanations or ways to stop the nightmares. That's when I learned something interesting. In a dream, It's almost impossible to read properly. Words get jumbled, and clocks don't make sense. This stuck with me, and I decided to use it as a reality check if I ever found myself trapped in a dream again. One night, I had a dream about buying a new phone. In the dream, it was a normal day, and I was out with my sister. We came across an Apple store, and I decided to check out the phones. As I was looking at them, I suddenly realized something felt off. That's when it hit me. I was dreaming. I looked up at the store clerk, then at my sister, who was chatting away about the phones. I stopped her mid-sentence and said, "I think I'm in a dream." She immediately froze and stared at me, her expression blank and eerie. That's when I started to panic. I grabbed her shoulders and shouted at her to wake me up, begging her for help. But everyone in the store had stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at me. Their empty eyes bore into me as I screamed, "I can't wake up. I'm trapped." Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in my bed. My sister was sitting next to me. I told her everything that had just happened, and we talked for a while. But something didn't feel right. I looked around and noticed a box in the room. I tried to read the writing on it, but the words were all jumbled. That's when it hit me again. I was still dreaming. Confused and terrified, I looked at my sister, threw my hands in the air, and shouted, "I'm still dreaming?" And then there was darkness again. When I woke up a second time, I was exhausted and disoriented. I grabbed my phone to check the time, but the numbers didn't make sense. I turned to see my sister standing in the middle of the room, silently staring at me. My heart sank. Realizing I was trapped yet again, the darkness consumed me. Finally, I woke up for real. My mom was standing at the door, calling me for breakfast. I took a deep breath, relieved it was all over. I checked my phone. It was working normally. I could read and see the time. Everything seemed fine. That is, until I went to the washroom. As I looked in the mirror, I froze. My reflection wasn't mine. My face was distorted, gray, and slashed, like something out of a horror movie. The longer I stared, the uglier and more horrifying it became. I stumbled back, horrified, and that's when I finally woke up for real. I was drenched in sweat, my heart racing like never before. I cried for hours, too scared to even close my eyes again. That night, I slept next to my mom to feel safe. Slowly the nightmares started to fade, but the memory of this dream still haunts me to this day.